Only 14 months remain until the Maker returns. Will Tony and his Ultimates be ready in time to stop him? Welcome to the Comicstorian Complete Story Series, where we take trade paperbacks and single issues and we break them down into digestible bites to help you understand. Then we read them dramatically back to you. All alterations to the panels, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. Tony has been gathering allies and recruiting his team of Ultimates in preparation of the Maker's return. Recruiting people such as America Chavez and Joanna. This universe is She-Hulk. But he has caught the eye of the Incredible Hulk, and he is ready to make Tony regret his mission. This is Ultimates 5 and 6. I hope you enjoy. Aboard the secret Stark satellite known as the Triskelion, images of destruction flash across a screen in front of Tony Stark. He looks over his shoulder as Steve Rogers comes into the room. "Steve, we got a problem," Tony says with a sigh. He shows Steve the images, explaining that over the last several months, several Roxxon sites have been hit by an eco-terrorist. The weapons used were a cutting-edge, self-printing, smart projectile weapon system designed by Tony himself. "So, arrows?" Steve says as he looks at the specs. Tony explains that the weapon was sent to someone on the Maker's list. "The man was supposed to be the hero Hawkeye, but he rejected our offer," Tony explains. "Threw them in the trash can, you mean?" Steve says with a nod. Tony agrees, but explains that someone else picked up the weapons and is now using them. Steve looks at the reports again. "Tony, I'm not seeing the problem. This is what you wanted. Citizens taking up arms against the Council, its allies, and its infrastructure?" Steve points out. Tony nods in agreement, but explains that he doesn't want anyone else getting hurt. He looked into the man using the arrows. "I finally had a chance to run this person's numbers. It doesn't look good, Steve. Their heroism score was in the bottom 10th percentile, and on the villain potential index," Tony explains. But Steve stops him. "Some things aren't captured in numbers, Tony. I thought you'd learned that after what happened last time," Steve says. Tony nods again, but explains that he doesn't want these weapons in the hands of someone he doesn't trust, that he doesn't want to be responsible for any more deaths. Steve finally agrees. "I'll take care of it," he says with a sigh. Later, at the Roxxon refinery, 1.5 miles from the Missouri River, Captain America raises his hands slowly. The terrorist takes careful aim with a repulsor arrow. "So they sent a cowboy, huh?" Hawkeye asks. "Charlie Ramsey, you know why I'm here?" Steve asks the young Native American. Hawkeye shrugs. "You're one of those Ultimates. Shouldn't you be blowing up a school or something?" he asks. Steve motions to the refinery destruction around them. "Blowing things up seems to be your thing," he points out. Hawkeye smiles as he fires an arrow. "Draw, cowboy!" he shouts. Steve moves quickly, leaping over the arrow and drawing his shield. But the repulsor arrow suddenly turns in the air and comes back at him, slamming into Steve and knocking him away. Hawkeye reaches back and crafts another arrow as Steve struggles to his feet. "I know all about cowboys," Hawkeye says, pointing out that even though the old movies showed cowboys killing Indians, his father always loved them. He fires a sonic arrow that goes screaming past Steve, stunning him briefly. But Steve gets back up quickly. "Stop, I didn't come here to fight. I just need those weapons back. They're dangerous. You can't be much older than 16, Steve shouts. Hawkeye stares at him. "How old were you when you put on that suit? Took a stand?" he asks, demanding to know why Steve is allowed to be a hero. "The guy who made this, Tony Stark, he gets to be a hero. But me? I don't meet the criteria? I failed a test or something?" Hawkeye asks, aiming for Steve's head, but he raises the arrow at the last second. "You know what they do, these Roxxon energy partners?" Hawkeye asks as he lets loose the arrow, and it opens up in the air, releasing a dozen cluster bombs that fall all around Steve, who backflips away. "They do whatever they want," Hawkeye says, explaining that they destroy the land and poison the drinking water. And when his people try to fight back and protest, to stand up for what they believe in, they kill us, or throw us in jail, or force us off our land, he snaps. Steve lands and whirls, throwing his shield. It bounces off a wall and comes at Hawkeye from the side. But Charlie draws an inertia-canceling arrow and fires. The arrow hits the shield, and they both drop to the ground. "This life is a burden. You don't have to take it on," Captain America tells him. But Charlie shakes his head, explaining that when he found this weapon, Tony told him that he could be a hero. "He was talking to someone else," Steve explains. "I know!" Charlie shouts, but explains that the vision isn't important, that it is the person that gives it power and meaning. He keeps firing arrows at Captain America, who dodges and attacks. Steve finally has had enough and rushes forward. He grabs an arrow out of the air and snaps it, tossing his shield at the last moment to knock Charlie to the ground. Charlie falls to the ground, the bow clattering away. He looks up to see Captain America standing over him. Just like the movies, cowboy wins, an Indian dies. Everybody cheers, Charlie sighs. But Steve reaches down and helps him to his feet. "No one's dying. Get up and use those eyes," Steve says as he turns to the sound of approaching vehicles. Charlie turns his targeting vision to the other end of the refinery, where Roxxon mercenaries have arrived, loaded for a war. "There's 1,000 of them," Charlie whispers in surprise. Steve nods and retrieves his shield. "I tried to tell you, what you're doing is dangerous. That is a Roxxon cleanup crew," Steve tells him. He picks up the bow and hands it to Hawkeye. "Tony told me that with proper training, an operator could stop a small army with this weapon. I hope you've been practicing," Steve tells him. The two charge forward, meeting the Roxxon mercenaries head on. Later, as the last of the soldiers fall, Captain America and Hawkeye stand victorious. "Not bad, Hawkeye. Not bad at all," Captain America says with a smile. "We should get out of here. More will be coming," Steve says as he starts to walk away. But Hawkeye is confused. "What about our fight? Don't you want your arrows back?" he asks. Steve shakes his head. "No, I was never going to take them back. I just wanted to be sure before I told Iron Lad that he didn't miss his target," he says with a smile. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Bruce Banner watches the battle on the monitors, ignoring the head of Roxxon's complaints. He knows the only way to destroy the Ultimates. He has been studying them. "The Ultimates operate as an insurgency. You can't destroy an insurgency piece by piece," he explains. He turns away from the monitors, anger flashing over his brutish face. "I'm going to kill them all at once," he growls. 13 months remain. Beneath the Earth, Tony Stark stands before the doorway to a damage control black site. He turns back to his team, the fully gathered members of the so-called Ultimates, for the first time. Tony looks at them all. The Human Torch, Hawkeye, Sif, Thor, Captain America, Wasp, Giant Man, She-Hulk, and America Chavez. The only member missing was Doom, who had stayed behind on the secret satellite to conduct experiments on the time travel device. The heroes all look determined, and Tony nods. "This is a rescue mission," Tony tells them, explaining that hacking into the Council's overnet had led them to information about this superpowered prison within the damage control black site. "The Council's getting nervous, and the prisoners are set to be executed tomorrow, unless we do something about it," Tony continues. Giant Man raises his hand. Should we all just be standing out in front of the secret facility like this?" he asks. She-Hulk glances at him, but shrugs and nods at the good question. Captain America turns back to the heroes, explaining that they want to get the prisoners and get out, and not get involved in a drawn-out battle. Tony turns back, his helmet sliding into place as he powers up his gauntlet lasers. "No one dies today, not because of us. This is a rescue mission," he repeats as he fires and blows the doors off the hinges. The heroes charge in. "Ultimates, assemble!" Tony starts to say, But his words trail off as he looks around at the vast city before them. A magnificent sky blazes overhead, full of more stars than anyone can count. Sitting before them is the Hulk, surrounded by his acolytes as he pours a cup of tea. He glances up at them. At last, patience is a tree with bitter roots that bears sweet fruits. Will you join me for some tea? He asks politely. But She-Hulk is not polite. She bellows with rage as she rushes at the monster who poisoned her island. Banner! She bellows as she leaps through the air. But Hulk merely smiles. Joanna, I haven't seen you since you were a child. You've grown, he says as he avoids her blows, merely dodging around them. Hate has made me strong, and I have been saving all my hate for you, she shouts as she continues to try and punch him. Banner nods as his fist begins to glow. Rage can be a devastating weapon in the right hands, Hulk says as he hits the woman with the atomic iron fist, launching her into the air until she lands hard enough to create a crater. With a sigh, Hulk returns to his seat, crossing his legs and motioning towards his visitors. Now, how about that tea? I made enough for everyone, he says simply. Meanwhile, back at the satellite, Doom is watching the monitors and is shocked as the entire team's locators go offline at once. What have you gotten yourself into now, Iron Lad? Doom whispers to himself. Back in the city, America turns back to the entrance to find that the door is gone and there's only a brick wall. We're trapped, she shouts. Iron Lad looks at Hulk, demanding to know where they are. Hulk smiles as he pours them tea. I have brought you to heaven, the immortal city of Kunlun to be precise. I rule all 7 of heaven's capital cities, Hulk explains. The Ultimates prepare for a fight, Iron Lad out front. Don't be afraid of him. There's 10 of us. He is still just one man, he says to his team. Hawkeye nods and draws an arrow. One giant radioactive man, he scoffs. Hulk holds out the tea for his guest, but sighs when he realizes that they aren't going to accept his offer, and he motions to his acolytes, who stand and ready themselves. They hold up syringes of green liquid and jab themselves. I'd hoped we could be civil about this. I made tea. The tea is a much more peaceful death, he says to Iron Lad. The acolytes begin to transform, their bodies warping into green monsters. Hulk nods. I suppose the time for tea is over, he whispers. The immortal weapons of the Hulk stand ready and launch themselves at the heroes. Meanwhile, Doom is continuing to search for his lost comrades. This is impossible. These instruments should be able to find them anywhere in the universe, he whispers as he taps the computer. The Ultimates launch themselves into the battle, with Iron Lad rushing at Hulk. This is what you wanted, isn't it? My attention? My anger? Hulk asks. He dodges a laser blast and kicks down at Iron Lad, driving him into the ground with the thermonuclear Thunderfoot. Well, congratulations! You have officially made me angry! Hulk growls as he grinds Tony into the ground. Human Torch, Hawkeye, and Captain America launch an attack against another acolyte, but their blows seem to just bounce off the enemy. Heaven's a lot more violent than I thought it would be, Hawkeye notes as his arrow bounces off his opponent. Giant Man and Wasp fight against Fat Cobra, who collides with Giant Man and brings him down. You're supposed to be pacifists. I listened to the Hulk's audiobook about it, Hank grunts. Janet buzzes around Fat Cobra's head and hits him with wasp stings. Sorry, honey. People will say anything to sell books, she says to her husband. Hulk smiles as Tony struggles to his feet. The other Ultimates are falling around him. Sif is knocked from the air, and Thor is surrounded. You call yourselves heroes? You're just children, Hulk scoffs as he strikes Tony again, breaking through his shields. I will teach you about power and the real world. he says as he hits Tony again, knocking him away. But Doom has finally reconnected with Iron Lad's visual feed, and his eyes widen in shock as he watches the battle. Thor is brought down. Sif falls next. Fat Cobra whirls on Janet and plucks her out of the air. He opens his mouth wide and bites down, seemingly swallowing her whole. Hulk stands over Iron Lad, whose shields flicker as they try to come back online. Hulk smiles as his fist begins to glow. You know, as the worldwide symbol of peace, I've missed blood on my hands. I wonder if Gandhi ever felt this way, Hulk says as he slams both fists down on Iron Lad, crushing him into the ground. Back in his lab, Doom is already working fast, trying to figure out the calculations for his plan to work. The teleportation device is nearby. In heaven, Hank bellows with rage as he grows even larger. Jan! I'll kill you! He screams at Fat Cobra as he brings his fist down, but the Gamma-powered acolyte stops the blow and laughs. But something is wrong. His stomach begins to quake, and blood flies from his mouth. Suddenly, he is ripped apart from the inside as Janet enlarges inside of him. She gasps for air and collapses to the ground. Her body is still smoking from stomach acid. Back at the lab, Doom puts his plan into motion. 7 seconds and 7,000 unknowns. One mistake and everyone is dead. Again. He whispers as he activates the teleportation device. Hulk tosses Iron Lad's shattered body away. I should thank you. Blowing up pipelines, destabilizing power grids, burning down the White House. You've only driven them deeper into our arms. Nothing makes one crave the status quo quite like a violent threat to it. In time, they'll come to wonder if you ever truly existed. If the whole thing wasn't an elaborate conspiracy, if you didn't really work for us all along, Hulk says as he stomps forward. Tony looks around weakly. His team has fallen. The Gamma Acolytes stand victorious. In a way, I suppose you did, Hulk says as he reaches down and picks Tony up. Rest now, little Stark. You've earned it. In the end, you were our best little soldier, Hulk says softly as he crushes Tony between his hands. His armor and body shattering as Hulk drops him to the ground. No! Joanna shouts as she leaps forward, slamming into the Hulk and knocking him away. She brings him to the ground and hits him again and again. You destroy everything! Enough! She bellows. But Hulk catches her next blow. I'm impressed. In a different world, your spirit might count for something, he says as he crushes her hand, shattering it. He pushes her off and stands tall, his fist glowing once more. But this is not that world. Take heart though. Your defeat will avoid a wider conflict. Your sacrifice saves millions of lives, he says as he prepares to strike. But Doom activates his plan, and the Hulk stares in shock as the entire team suddenly disappears before his eyes. Doom lets out a sigh of relief as his plan works, and the Ultimates reappear on the station. Everyone begins to pick themselves up, but are startled by Joanna's cry of anguish. They all turn to see her cradling Tony's body. No, you were too late. Iron Lad is dead, she wails. Only 12 months remain until the Maker returns. And there you have it. Tony Stark is dead. So who is going to stop the Maker when he returns? Are the Ultimates up to the task after getting a beatdown from the Hulk? You'll have to subscribe to the channel to get a notification when the next part goes live. And of course, like the video if you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time. Rest in peace, Benny.